The grand hall was a beast of light and sound. It wasn't just a building. It was a living thing that hummed with money, with expectation, with a polished kind of power. This was the Laurent Concert Hall, and tonight it was hosting the final round of the prestigious Viridian International Piano Competition. The air itself smelled different, like old books, expensive perfume, and the faint, clean scent of lemon polish. During the intermission, the beast was at its loudest. People spilled out from the auditorium seats, a river of silk, tuxedos, and chatter. Glasses of champagne clinked. Laughter rang out in sharp, confident bursts. Everyone seemed to know how to stand, how to hold a glass, how to discuss the merits of the second contestant's interpretation of Chopin with just the right amount of frown and nod. Moving through this river was like moving through a different world entirely. A boy, slight for his 16 years, navigated the edges. He wore a simple gray shirt and dark trousers, both worn soft from many washes, but spotlessly clean. His sneakers were old, the fabric near the toe thin. He carried a small black bin liner and a cloth, his eyes fixed on the marble floor, the empty glasses on tables, the discarded programs. His name was Leo. He was not a guest. He was part of the machinery that kept the beautiful beast running. His father worked as a janitor for the hall, and on big nights like this, Leo came to help. It was extra money, cash in hand, and it meant they could work together. His father was a big, quiet man with gentle hands, currently across the room, carefully wiping down a grand piano that sat on a small raised platform for the donors to admire. Leo's job was the debris of the crowd. He was invisible, and he knew it. It wasn't a bitter feeling. It was just a fact, like the color of the walls. Eyes slid over him. If someone did see him, their gaze would flicker to his clothes, his bin bag, and then away, dismissing him as part of the background, a useful, silent thing, like a trash can or a coat rack. But Leo's own eyes kept drifting away from the floor. They were pulled, like iron to a magnet, to the heart of the hall. Through the open doors of the main auditorium, he could see it. The stage. And on the stage, under a single, respectful spotlight even now, was the concert grand piano. It was a monster of black lacquer, a sleek, silent king. From his angle, he could see the curve of its side, the faint, perfect reflection of the exit signs in its polished surface. He couldn't see the keys from here, but he knew them. He knew the feel of them. Not these specific keys, but keys in general. The thought made a hollow, aching space open up in his chest. A burst of loud, young laughter snapped his attention back. A group of 3 competitors, still in their performance attire, had clustered near a pillar. They were maybe a year or 2 older than him. A boy in a tailored suit was swirling his water glass, holding court. A girl in a sparkling blue dress laughed, throwing her head back. Another boy nodded along, adjusting his cufflinks. They were from another planet. Leo bent to pick up a crumpled napkin, so I told him, if you're going to pedal like that, you might as well be driving a truck, the boy in the suit said. And his friends giggled. Leo moved closer, sweeping his cloth over a table. He was just a ghost. The girl in blue noticed him. Her eyes, bright and critical, scanned him. She didn't look at his face, but at his shoes. A faint, amused smile touched her lips. She leaned in and whispered something to the boy in the suit. The boy turned, his gaze landing on Leo. It was a slow, appraising look, from the old sneakers up to the simple shirt. There was no malice in it at first, just a cool curiosity, like looking at a faintly interesting insect. "Check it out," the boy said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "The help is very attentive tonight." Leo's ears burned. He kept his head down, moving to the next table, probably dreaming of playing the big piano. The other boy chuckled, not unkindly, but with a casual certainty that was worse. "Everyone thinks it's easy, right?" Just bang the keys. The girl in blue sighed, a theatrical sound. Oh, don't. My little cousin got a toy keyboard for his birthday, and now he's a composer. It's torture. The first boy, the one in the suit, took a step closer to Leo. Hey, you, clean-up kid. Leo stopped. He had to. He looked up, meeting the boy's eyes. They were a light, clear green. You see that? The boy said, nodding toward the donor's piano his father was cleaning. That's a Bissendorfer. Costs more than your house. Maybe more than your whole street. He smiled, a flash of perfect teeth. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a performance. You want to touch it? I won't tell. Go on. Give it a little tap. The girl giggled. Alexander, don't be cruel. I'm not. Alexander said, his eyes never leaving Leo's flushed face. I'm being generous. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. For him, anyway. Leo's throat was tight. He felt his father's presence across the room, a steady, calming force, but he was too far away to hear. He just shook his head slightly and turned to go. No? Alexander called after him, his voice light and mocking. Smart choice. Some things are just for certain people. You stick to the bins, yeah? That's your stage. The laughter followed him as he slipped through a service door into a quiet, carpeted hallway. The silence there was heavy. Leo leaned against the wall, the rough texture of the wallpaper against his back. He closed his eyes, and the sound of the piano from the competition's first half echoed in his head. Not the perfect, powerful sounds from the stage, but the music that lived in him. A simpler, sadder, more beautiful tune. His mother's tune. He could still see her hands, thin and quick, dancing over the chipped keys of their upright piano at home. The piano that was older than he was, that was always slightly out of tune, that had a middle C, which stuck if you didn't hit it just right. Listen, Leo, she would say, her voice a soft whisper. The music isn't in the instrument. It's in here. And she would tap her chest, then his. He missed her with a sudden, physical pain that took his breath away. It had been a year, but in moments like this, it felt like minutes. Taking a deep breath, he pushed off the wall. The intermission would be ending soon. He had to finish. He went back into the hall. The crowd was starting to trickle back toward the auditorium doors. The group of competitors was gone, probably taking their seats. His father was now tidying up near the stage entrance, giving him a small, tired smile. Leo focused on his work, collecting the last of the glasses. He was emptying a final bin when he heard a crash, a gasp, and the sound of splashing water dot near the donor's piano. A stage manager in a black headset had backed into a tall, slender vase of white lily. It had toppled, water pouring directly onto the closed fallboard of the beautiful Bissendorfer, cascading down its side and, most horrifyingly, seeping into the narrow gap above the keys. Panic erupted. The stage manager cursed, snatching up the vase. A security guard rushed over. Get it dry now. The manager hissed, her face pale. The donors will have a fit. And if the keys swell... Leo's father was already there, his big hands moving quickly. He grabbed his cloths, but they were the dry dusting ones. He needed absorbent towels. Leo! His father called, his voice low but urgent. The janitor's closet the white towels. Now run. Leo didn't run. He flew. He darted through the service door, down the hallway, his heart pounding. He skidded into the small closet, grabbed an armful of thick, white cotton towels, and sprinted back. When he returned, the small crisis had drawn a small audience. A few late returning attendees lingered, watching the commotion. His father was mopping water from the floor. The stage manager was frantically dabbing the piano's exterior. Here, Leo said, handing the towels to his father. "Good. Help me," his father said, his voice calm but tight. He began carefully opening the piano lid. "We must dry the keys. Gently. You understand? Like your mother's." Leo nodded. He took a fresh, soft towel. His father lifted the fallboard, revealing the glorious water-spotted keyboard. The ivory and ebony keys, usually so pristine, were beaded with droplets. It looked like the piano was crying. With a reverence that came from a deep old place, Leo began. He didn't wipe. He blotted. Gently, carefully, he pressed the towel onto each key, soaking up the moisture. The feel of the cool, smooth ivory under the cloth was familiar and strange at the same time. These keys were perfect. They had no cracks, no chips. They were alive under his touch. He was so focused, the world narrowed to this single task, that he didn't notice more people filtering back in, curious about the delay. He didn't see the boy in the suit, Alexander, returning to his seat with his friends, stopping to watch the cleanup with a smirk. Leo finished blotting the last of the upper keys. The piano seemed to sigh. The wood was damp, but the keys were dry. A strange feeling washed over him, a connection, a pull. The memory of his mother's face, smiling as she played her private, heartbreaking melody, filled him. It was a song no one else knew. A song for him. His fingers, still holding the towel, trembled. Without really thinking, driven by a need deeper than fear or shame, he let the towel fall to the floor. He stretched out his right hand, the fingers calloused not from hours of disciplined practice, but from work, from life. He hovered for a second over the middle C. Then he pressed down. The note that rang out was not a bang. It was not a clumsy tap. It was a single, pure, perfect tone. It filled the space around the piano, clear and warm as a bell. It vibrated in the air, sweet and true. And in the ringing silence that followed that one beautiful note, he heard the laughter dot. It started with a snort, then a disbelieving chuckle. He looked up. Alexander and his friends were standing there, along with a dozen other well-dressed people. They were all looking at him. Alexander's face was split in a wide, delighted grin. "Oh, wonderful," Alexander announced, his voice carrying. "A demonstration. Come on then, maestro. Let's hear your concerto." The girl in blue covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Others smiled, shaking their heads. They saw a boy in old clothes, his hand on a piano he could never own, playing a single childish note. It was the funniest thing they'd seen all night. Leo froze, his hand still on the key, the beautiful sound now feeling stupid and small. The heat of 100 eyes burned into him. He was no longer invisible. He was a spectacle. And in that moment, something in him, something that had been coiled tight for a very long time, quietly snapped. The shame was hot, but underneath it, a colder, harder feeling rose. A memory of his mother's voice. "The music is in here." He didn't take his hand away. He looked down at the keys, a sea of black and white. He ignored the snickers, the whispered comments. He slowly, deliberately, brought his other hand up from his side. The crowd's laughter died down, replaced by a buzz of anticipation. They were waiting for the joke to continue. They were waiting for him to fail. Leo closed his eyes. He didn't see the rich people or the sparkling hall. He saw a small, sunlit apartment. He heard a sticking middle C. He felt the hand on his shoulder. His fingers found their starting positions. And he began to play. The single note had hung in the air, pure and clear, for less than a second before the laughter swallowed it. To the boy in the suit, Alexander, it was the perfect punchline. This kid, this nobody with his cleaning rags, had actually done it. He'd touched the forbidden's piano and produced one pathetic beginner's note. Bravo. Alexander called out, clapping slowly, sarcastically. The small cluster of people around him tittered. They were well-dressed, important-looking. A man with a silver mustache chuckled into his program. A woman in pearls smiled, a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. This was an unexpected intermission entertainment. Leo flinched as if struck. The sound of their laughter was physical, a wave of heat that crashed over him. His first instinct was to run, to snatch his hand back, grab his fallen towel, and disappear through the service door. He wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him. His father was still there, a few feet away, holding a damp cloth. Leo saw the worry, the deep unease in his dad's eyes. This was trouble. They were making a scene. Scenes were for the performers on stage, not for people like them. But as he went to pull away, his fingertips brushed the cool ivory again. And in that touch, he didn't hear the laughter anymore. He heard his mother's voice. It was just a memory, but it was louder than the people in the hall. A scared feeling. "Leo," she used to say, her accent softening the words. "That is just the door. The music is on the other side. You must walk through the scared to find it." He had been scared so often since she'd been gone. Scared of the quiet apartment. Scared of the future. Scared of this huge, glittering world that had nothing to do with him. That fear was a familiar coat he wore every day. The laughter around him sharpened. "Come on, then," Alexander urged, leaning against a pillar. "We're waiting for the next movement." "Is it chopsticks?" "I love chopsticks." Something settled inside Leo. A cold, quiet rock dropped into the center of his panic. He wasn't playing for them. He wasn't playing for this hall, or for the competition, or to prove anything to the boy in the suit. He was playing for her. For the memory of a sunlit room, and a sticking key, and the smell of her perfume like lemons and old paper. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at his own hands, resting lightly on the keys. They were his mother's hands. Thin, long-fingered. Her hands had done this. They had created this. He took a breath, deep and slow. And he began. The first few notes were hesitant, feeling their way. They were low, in the bass clef, a slow wandering pattern that sounded like someone lost in a big, empty house. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of technically brilliant run the competition kids had been playing. It was sad. It was a question asked in the dark. The laughter didn't stop immediately. Alexander snorted. "What is that?" "Sounds like a broken music box." But the woman in pearls stopped smiling. Her head tilted slightly. The man with the mustache stopped flipping his program. Leo's left hand settled into a repeating, deep pattern, a heartbeat. Then his right hand came in. The melody that emerged from the higher keys was so delicate, it almost wasn't there. It was the sound of a single drop of water falling into a still pond. Then another. Then another. The notes were clear and perfect, each one placed with a heartbreaking precision. They hung in the air, shimmering, before fading. The hall grew quieter. The chatter from the few people still lingering by the auditorium doors died down. They turned to look. Who was playing? It wasn't time for the second half. The melody unfolded, slow and aching. It was a story of missing someone. You could hear it. You could hear the empty chair, the unfinished conversation, the ghost of a laugh in a silent room. Leo's body swayed just a little, his shoulders hunched over the keyboard, not in a performer's posture, but in the posture of someone sharing a secret. His face was calm, but his brows were drawn together in concentration, and in pain. His father stood frozen, the wet cloth dripping slowly onto the marble floor. He hadn't heard this music in over a year. Not since the last time his wife had felt strong enough to sit at their old piano. A tear traced a clean path through the fine dust on his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Alexander's smirk had vanished. He was frowning, confused. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. The kid was supposed to be terrible. This wasn't terrible. It was unnerving. It didn't sound like practice. It sounded like a soul talking. More people were coming back from the lobby now, drawn by the strange, beautiful music. They gathered in a loose half-circle, their earlier amusement completely gone. Their faces were puzzled and intrigued, then slowly, deeply moved. A young couple held hands tightly. An older man removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The piece built. Leo's hands began to move faster, but it wasn't a showy speed. It was a gathering storm of feeling. The left hand's heartbeat grew more urgent. The right hand's melody fractured into cascading notes, like shards of memory falling through light. It was complex now, intricate. The kind of music that required not just practice, but lived experience. The kind of music that couldn't be faked. Backstage, the head judge for the competition, a man named Anton Voss, was arguing with the stage manager about the water incident. He was a tall, severe man with a crown of white hair and a permanent frown. He hated delays. He hated mess. Is the instrument compromised? He snapped. No, Mr. Voss. It's fine. The janitors are drying it now. It was just a little, and then the music reached them. It slipped under the heavy stage door and wound its way down the corridor. Anton Voss stopped talking. His head jerked up. He knew every major piano piece ever written. He had judged competitions on 5 continents for 40 years. He did not know this piece, but he knew of it. A ghost from his past tapped him on the shoulder, icy fingers on his neck. That? What is that? He whispered, not to the manager, but to the air. He knew the phrasing. That specific lyrical touch in the upper register. The way the left hand carried the emotion like a weight. He had only heard one person play like that. A student from long ago. His most gifted student. A young woman with a talent so raw and true, it scared him. She had written her own music, strange, beautiful, heartbreaking things. She had played one, just one, at a small recital here, years ago. And then she had disappeared from the music world. Vanished. It was the greatest disappointment of his career. He pushed past the stunned stage manager and strode quickly down the corridor. He pushed open the door to the hall. The sight that greeted him was surreal. The second half of a major international competition was about to begin, and the entire audience seemed to be gathering in the lobby, silent as stones, gathered around the donor's piano. And at the piano was a boy in threadbare clothes. Anton Voss moved to the edge of the crowd, his critic's mind shutting off, his human heart pounding against his ribs. He listened. He watched the boy's hands dot. It was her music. There was no doubt. It was the same piece. Les Close du Souvenir. The Bells of Memory. She had never finished it. She'd said it was too sad to complete. But this was complete. The boy was playing a final movement Anton had never heard. The storm of notes settled, softening, returning to that single dripping water melody from the beginning. But it was different now. It was warmer. It was a lullaby. The heartbreaking question from the beginning was being answered, not with words, but with a gentle, endless kindness. The music wasn't just about missing someone anymore. It was about carrying them with you. It was about love that didn't end. The final notes were so quiet, the crowd leaned forward to hear them. A high, pure note, held with the soft pedal, fading into nothing until it was just a vibration in the air, and then silence. Leo lifted his hands. He placed them gently in his lap. He was trembling all over, drained, as if he had just run for miles. He kept his eyes closed, back in that sunlit apartment, smelling lemons and old paper, For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the distant hum of the hall's air conditioning. Then, Anton Voss took a step forward. His stern face was shattered, tears openly running into the lines of his cheeks. He didn't care. He walked slowly, the crowd parting for him as if for a king or a priest. He stopped in front of the piano. Leo finally looked up. He saw the old man's tears and looked frightened again, like a child expecting to be punished. Anton Voss didn't shout. His voice, when it came, was rough, cracked with emotion. It wasn't loud, but in the perfect silence, everyone heard it. "Young man," he said. The word boy didn't seem to fit anymore. "That piece? Who taught you that?" Leo swallowed, his throat dry. He looked over at his father, who gave a small, encouraging nod. "My mother," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. Anton Voss closed his eyes for a second, as if in pain. "Your mother? What is her name?" Leo said it then. The name he hadn't spoken aloud in this place. The name that belonged to the world of their small apartment, not this palace of sound. Elena. A gasp went through the small section of the crowd old enough to remember. A few of the competition's older judges, who had come out to see the commotion, exchanged stunned glances. Elena. Anton Voss reached out a hand. He didn't touch Leo. He touched the piano, his fingers resting on the wood beside the keyboard, right where the water had been. "Elena," he repeated, the name a prayer. He looked at Leo, really looked at him. He saw the shape of his eyes, the way he held his head. "And she is gone?" Leo nodded, just once. He couldn't say the words. The old judge understood. He saw the father, standing guard. He saw the old clothes. He saw the story written in the air between them. The brilliant musician who left it all behind. The son who learned her music, not in a conservatory, but at her knee. The silence that followed her, and the beautiful, heartbreaking way her music had come back. He looked from Leo to the grand piano, then out at the sea of stunned, respectful faces. The boy in the suit, Alexander, looked pale, his eyes wide with a new and shaming understanding. He wasn't looking at a cleaner anymore. He was looking at an artist. A real one. Anton Voss straightened his shoulders. He turned to face the crowd. When he spoke again, his voice was clear and strong, carrying the full weight of his authority. "The competition," he announced, "will resume in 20 minutes. Then he turned back to Leo. He did not gesture to the stage. He did not offer a contestant's slot. What had just happened was beyond competition. Instead, he gestured to the piano bench. "Sit," he said, his voice gentle now. "Please, tell me about her." The silence after the old judge spoke felt heavier than before. It wasn't just quiet. It was a held breath. All the eyes in the room were stuck on the two figures by the piano. The famous, stern Anton Voss, with tears on his face, and the skinny boy in worn clothes, who had just shattered the evening. "Sit, please. Tell me about her." Leo didn't move at first. He was hollowed out. Playing the piece had taken everything that was inside him and poured it out through his fingers. Now he felt like an empty glass. The anger and defiance that had pushed him through the first notes were gone, leaving only a shaky, cold feeling. He looked at his father. His dad gave a slow, deep nod. It was okay. Leo sat back down on the piano bench, but he turned away from the keys, facing the old man. He couldn't look at the crowd. He could feel them there, a wall of silent pressure. Anton Voss pulled a velvet-covered chair from against the wall and sat down too. He was close. He didn't look like a judge anymore. He just looked old and tired and sad. "Elena," Voss said again, testing the name. "She was my student. A long time ago." He shook his head, a faint, disbelieving smile touching his lips. She had a light, but it was a quiet light. It frightened the loud people in this business. She didn't want the fame. She just wanted the music. Leo listened, his own heart beating in his ears. He knew his mother had studied music, but she never talked about the famous teacher. She just called him a strict old man who loved Bach more than people. She wrote that piece, Voss continued, his eyes drifting to the piano keys. Les close du souvenir. She played an early version of it here once, in a small recital. It was unfinished. She said she didn't know how to end it, and then she left. He looked back at Leo, his gaze sharp. The ending you played, that was different. That was complete. Who finished it? Leo's voice was a scratchy whisper. She did. When? After I was born. Voss leaned back as if the words had pushed him. He understood. The unfinished piece about memory and loss. A child arrives. The music finds its resolution. A lullaby woven into the grief. It made a perfect, heartbreaking sense. She taught you, Voss stated. Leo nodded. At home, we had an old piano. The middle C stuck sometimes. A real, genuine laugh escaped the old judge. A short, surprised sound. She would have hated that. She was a perfectionist about sound. He looked at Leo's hands, resting in his lap. They were trembling slightly. But she taught you on a broken piano. It wasn't broken, Leo said, a little defensive spark coming back. It was just old. Like a friend. The music wasn't in the piano, she said. It was in here. He tapped his chest, just as she used to do. Voss stared at him. In that simple sentence, he heard Elena's voice, her philosophy exactly. She had always argued with him about it. He believed in the perfect instrument, the perfect hall, the perfect technique. She believed the music started somewhere else. Looking at this boy, who had just turned a lobby into a sacred space using a piano that had just been mopped, Anton Voss felt his entire life's belief system tilt slightly. The crowd was still there. No one had moved to go back to their seats. The competition was forgotten. They were watching a different kind of performance now, a real one. The boy in the suit, Alexander, hadn't moved either. His face was pale, his earlier smugness replaced by a deep, uncomfortable confusion. He was a technician. He practiced 8 hours a day to master the notes written by others. This boy had just played a piece that didn't exist in any book, a piece born from a personal story he couldn't even imagine. The difference between what he did and what he had just witnessed was suddenly, painfully clear. A woman from the competition committee, dressed in a sharp black suit, nervously approached Voss. Maestro. The schedule? The other competitors. Voss didn't even look at her. He held up a single finger. It was a command. She stopped and retreated. He focused on Leo again. Your mother. She never played professionally? Leo shook his head. She played for me. And for herself. She said the music out here, he gestured to the grand hall, was too much about winning. Not enough about feeling. Voss winced, as if the words were a physical blow. He remembered the furious arguments. Asterisk, you are wasting a divine gift. He had shouted at her. Asterisk, you are turning it into a hobby. She had left his studio that day and never returned. And you? Voss asked, his voice softer. Do you play? I mean, besides her pieces? Leo shrugged, a small, shy movement. A little, the classical stuff. She taught me that, too. But it's not the same. I don't have the papers for the schools, the auditions. His voice trailed off. He didn't say the rest. We don't have the money. Voss followed his glance over to his father, who stood quietly, a solid, patient presence. The man gave nothing away, but Voss saw the calloused hands, the clean but faded workshirt. He saw the fierce, protective pride in the man's eyes when he looked at his son. An idea, wild and impulsive, began to form in the old judge's mind. It went against every protocol. It was unfair, it was chaotic, it was entirely emotional. It was, he realized, exactly what Elena would have wanted. He stood up suddenly. The movement made Leo jump. Voss turned to face the crowd. His face, usually so stern and unreadable, was alive with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the rich, trained tone of a man used to addressing halls. "You have just heard something that no competition can ever judge. You have heard a piece of a soul." The room was utterly still. "This young man," Voss continued, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo flinched, but didn't pull away. "He is not a contestant. He has no formal training from our great institutions. He learned music as one learns a first language at home, from someone he loved." He paused, letting his words sink in. He looked directly at Alexander and the other young competitors, who were watching, their faces a mix of awe and envy. "This is a reminder. The technique we reward on that stage," he nodded toward the auditorium doors, "is the body of the music. But what you just heard was its heart. Never forget the difference." He turned back to Leo. "You said you don't have the papers. That ends tonight." He looked at the woman in the black suit. "Bring me a chair from the stage. Place it there." He pointed to a spot just to the side of the piano. The woman blinked, confused. "A chair, maestro?" "Yes. And bring the other judges out here, now." There was a flurry of movement. The crowd buzzed with confusion and excitement. This was entirely unprecedented. A stagehand hurried through the doors and returned a moment later with a simple, straight-backed chair from the stage. He placed it where Voss had pointed. The other 4 judges, elderly men and women with distinguished faces, emerged from backstage, looking bewildered. They had heard the music from inside, had felt the strange energy in the hall. Voss addressed them. "You heard it. You know who his teacher was. I am invoking the artistic recognition clause. Right here. Right now." One of the other judges, a woman with kind eyes, gasped softly. The artistic recognition clause was a forgotten, almost mythical rule in the competition's bylaws. It allowed for a musician, not officially entered, to be heard and considered for a special scholarship if a majority of the judges witnessed an act of extraordinary, non-competitive artistry. It had never been used. We have a stage full of talented young pianists waiting. Another judge, a stern-looking man, argued quietly. "And they will play," Voss said firmly. "But first, they will listen. We will all listen." He looked at Leo. "You will sit in this chair, and you will play one piece for us. Any piece you wish. Not your mother's. Something from the classical repertoire. Something she taught you. Do you understand?" Leo felt the world spin. This wasn't happening. He looked desperately at his father. His father's eyes were wide with shock, but he nodded again, slowly. There was a new hope in his face, a fragile, glowing thing. Leo stood up. His legs felt like water. He walked the few steps to the simple chair and sat down. He was facing the piano sideways. He wasn't at the center of it. He was a visitor. All 5 judges arranged themselves in a semicircle facing him. The crowd pressed in closer, a ring of spectators around an impromptu arena. The air was electric. Voss took his seat with the other judges. He leaned forward. "When you are ready." Leo looked at the piano. It looked different now. Less like a king and more like a tool. A big, beautiful tool. He thought of his mother. What would she choose? She loved Chopin. She said his music was all feeling, disguised as notes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He walked to the piano. He adjusted the bench just slightly. He wiped his sweaty palms on his trousers. Then he placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play the fiery, difficult pieces the competitors had chosen. He didn't play to impress. He played Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. It was a piece about the night, about quiet longing. It was not the most technically challenging piece in the world, but it was one of the most emotionally deep. He began. His touch was lighter than before, more careful. This wasn't his music. This was him speaking through someone else's. But as he played, he poured his own longing into it, the longing for his mother, the loneliness of the last year, the quiet hope he saw in his father's eyes just now. The notes rose and fell, sweet and sorrowful. The judges listened, their professional ears analyzing. His technique was not flawless. There was a slight stiffness in his left-hand arpeggios. His pedaling was unorthodox. But the sound he produced, the sound was pure, singing emotion. He made the grand piano sound intimate, like a confession in a small room. When the final, gentle chords faded, Leo sat still, head bowed. The judges looked at each other. No words were needed. The stern-faced judge who had protested gave a single solemn nod. Anton Vos stood. He walked over to Leo, who was still sitting at the piano. Drained for the second time that night, the Artistic Recognition Scholarship is awarded, Voss announced, his voice ringing in the silent hall, for demonstrated extraordinary musicality and soul. It provides a full tuition to the conservatory of your choice and a living stipend. The crowd erupted, not in wild cheers, but in a warm, sustained applause that was more respectful than excited. They were applauding the story. They were applauding the ghost of Elena. They were applauding the impossible thing that had just happened. Leo didn't hear the applause. He was looking at his father. His dad was no longer just nodding. He was crying openly, his big shoulders shaking, a hand pressed over his mouth. He was looking at his son and seeing his wife and seeing a future he never dared to dream of. All at once, Voss bent down close to Leo's ear. Over the sound of the clapping, he said, "She would be so proud. Not because of this scholarship, but because you were brave enough to walk through the scared. You found the music." He helped Leo to his feet and gently turned him to face the room. Leo saw the sea of smiling, tearful faces. He saw the other young pianists, clapping too, their expressions now filled with a new respect. Alexander met his eyes for a second, then looked down at his own expensive shoes. A faint, ashamed blush on his cheeks. Leo didn't feel like a winner. He felt like a boy who had just delivered a message from his mother. And finally, someone had listened. The applause washed over Leo like warm water. It was a strange feeling. It wasn't for something he had tried to do. It was for something that had simply happened. He stood there, guided to his feet by the old judge, Anton Voss, and felt unsteady. The bright lights of the lobby, the blur of smiling, clapping faces, it was too much. His eyes searched for and found his father. That was the only anchor he needed. His dad was pushing through the edge of the crowd, his big workman's hands held out slightly, as if to catch Leo if he fell. When he reached him, he didn't say a word. He just pulled Leo into a hug so tight it squeezed the air from his lungs. Leo could feel the rough texture of his father's work shirt against his cheek, and the shuddering breaths his father was taking. He smelled like lemon polish and clean sweat and home. In that hug, the noise of the hall faded away. It was just the two of them again, like always. "Your mother," his father whispered, his voice thick and broken against Leo's ear. "She is here. She saw." That was when the tears finally came for Leo. Quiet, hot tears that soaked into his father's shirt. They weren't tears of sadness or even of joy. They were tears of release. A year of holding everything in, of being strong, of being invisible, just cracked open. The applause began to die down, turning into a buzz of conversation. People were starting to move, some drifting back toward the auditorium for the second half of the competition, others lingering, hoping to catch a word or a closer look at the boy who had caused the miracle. The atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a formal concert event. It felt like a community that had just shared a secret. Anton Voss stood nearby, giving them their moment. He was speaking quietly with the other judges and the woman in the black suit. Papers were being produced. The artistic recognition clause, it seemed, had a lot of paperwork attached, even when invoked in a lobby. One of the last people to stop clapping was the boy in the suit, Alexander. He stood apart from his friends now, his hands finally falling to his sides. He watched Leo and his father, the simple, powerful hug that said more than any performance ever could. The hot shame in his gut had cooled into something else, a dull, heavy regret. He had seen a person as a prop for a joke. He had been utterly, completely wrong. As he turned to go back to his seat, his head was down, his earlier swagger gone. The memory of Leo's music and that hug would stick with him for a long, long time. Voss finally approached Leo and his father again. He had a small, serious smile on his face. "We must talk," he said, "but not here. Come with me." He led them away from the grand lobby, away from the curious eyes, through the same service door Leo had used earlier. They walked down the plain, carpeted corridor, past the janitor's closet where Leo had grabbed the towels. The contrast was jarring. 1 minute, a standing ovation. The next, the humming fluorescent lights and the smell of cleaning supplies. Voss opened a door marked Green Room 2. It was a small, comfortable space with a worn sofa, a few chairs, and a mirror surrounded by bright bulbs. It was where performers waited before going on stage. For Leo and his father, it felt like another world. "Please sit," Voss said, gesturing to the sofa. He sat across from them in an armchair. For a moment, he just looked at them, his sharp eyes taking in everything. "First," he began, "my name is Anton Voss. I was, as I said, your wife's teacher." He nodded to Leo's father. His father nodded back, his arms still around Leo's shoulders. "I know who you are, sir. She spoke of you." Not always kindly. He said it without anger, just stating a fact. Voss actually chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "I deserve that. I pushed her hard. I wanted her to be a star. She wanted something quieter, something true." He looked at Leo. "She found it. In you. In your family." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The scholarship is real. It is not a pity offer. It is because you have a genuine gift, a raw, emotional connection to the instrument that cannot be taught. But," he held up a finger, "raw talent is not enough. It needs shaping. It needs discipline. Your technique has holes. Your posture is poor. You have learned from a brilliant musician, but you have learned in isolation." Leo listened, his heart still pounding. This was the part where the dream would be taken back. He was sure of it. Where the fine print would appear. "Therefore," Voss continued, "the scholarship comes with a condition. For me, a selfish one." He took a deep breath. "I am an old man. I have taught hundreds of students to play notes perfectly. But in all these years, since Elena left my studio, I have not found one who understood the why of the music. Not until tonight." He looked directly at Leo, his gaze intense. "I would like you to come and study with me, privately, in addition to your conservatory classes. I will be your teacher, like I was for your mother." The air went out of the room. Leo's father stiffened beside him. This was beyond anything they could have imagined. Anton Voss was a legend. He didn't take on private students anymore, especially not unknown boys from nowhere. Why? Leo's father asked, the word blunt and protective. Why him? Voss's eyes grew distant for a moment. Because I failed her, he said quietly, honestly. I saw the gift, but I did not see the person. I tried to force her into a mold, and she broke away. I have regretted it every day. This is not just for him. It is for her. A chance to do it right. To help a gift grow without crushing the spirit inside it. He looked back at Leo. You have her soul in your playing. But you need the craft to set it free properly. Let me help you with that. It wasn't charity. It was an offer of work. Hard, demanding work. Leo could see that in the old man's eyes. He wasn't being saved. He was being challenged. What about? Leo started, then stopped, his voice small. What about my dad? We worked together. Voss had clearly thought of this. The stipend from the scholarship is for living expenses. It is modest, but it is enough for a small apartment near the conservatory. Your father, he said, turning to him with respect, should not have to worry about that. This is about Leo's future. Leo's father shook his head, overwhelmed. I have worked all my life, Mr. Voss. I don't know how to just not work. Then find different work, Voss said gently. In this city, be near your son. The hall manager told me you are the best janitor he has ever had. Careful, quiet, you pay attention to details. Those skills are valuable anywhere. He paused. This is a package. A new start for both of you. Because of her. The word her hung in the air. It was always about her. She was the thread that had pulled them all together in this strange room. Leo looked up at his father's face. He saw the struggle there, the pride, the fear of change, the fierce desire for his son to have more. He saw the love for his wife and the wish to honor her memory in the best way possible. Can we think about it? His father asked. Of course, Voss said. He pulled a crisp white card from his jacket pocket and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal number, not my assistant's. Call me within a week. The scholarship will be held. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. The competition is about to resume. You are welcome to stay and listen from a box seat. Or, he added, with a glance at Leo's exhausted face, you may go home. Tonight has been enough. They chose to go home. The idea of sitting in a fancy box, being looked at, was too much. They just wanted their own space, their own silence, to process what had happened. They left through the back service entrance, the way they always did. The cool night air hit Leo's face, a shock after the stuffy, emotional heat inside. The city sounds cars, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway felt real and grounding. They walked to the bus stop in silence for a while, the weight of the evening settling between them. Finally, his father spoke, his voice quiet in the dark. She would be laughing right now, you know. Leo looked at him. Laughing? Why? Because her stubborn, proud old teacher, his father said, a real smile in his voice, just offered everything to the son of the student he drove away. And because he did it after hearing her music played on a piano that had just been cleaned with our towels. She loved things that were ironic. Leo thought about it, and a small, tired smile touched his own lips. He could see her smile, the one that crinkled the corners of her eyes. He could almost hear her laugh. They got on the nearly empty bus. They sat in their usual seats near the back. As the bus rumbled through the city, passing by the bright windows of restaurants and shops, Leo leaned his head against the cool glass. He wasn't thinking about scholarships or famous teachers. He was thinking about the feeling of his hands on the keys when he played her piece. The feeling of being connected to her, across time and space. He looked at his father, staring out the window, his profile strong and tired in the passing streetlights. They were going back to their small, quiet apartment, to the old piano with the sticking key. But for the first time since his mother died, the silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt full of a new kind of music. The music of a future she had written for them, note by perfect note, without them even knowing. The week that followed was the strangest of Leo's life. It felt like he was walking through a dream, but the world kept insisting it was real. The small apartment, which usually felt like a quiet refuge, now seemed too small to contain what had happened. The old upright piano in the corner, with its chipped finish and that stubborn middle C, looked different. It was no longer just a piece of furniture. It was a witness. His father had called the number on Anton Voss's card after 2 days. He'd held the phone like it was a fragile bird, speaking in his careful, formal way. When he hung up, he just nodded at Leo. "It's real," was all he said. The paperwork arrived by special courier the next morning thick. Official envelopes that smelled of new paper. They spent evenings at the kitchen table, filling out forms under the glow of the single overhead light. Scholarship applications, housing applications for the conservatory dormitory, financial aid documents. It was a mountain of words they didn't fully understand, but they worked through it together, his father sounding out the long words, Leo looking up definitions on his phone. They didn't talk much about the big thing, the move. The new city, the fact that Leo would study with a legend. Talking about it felt like tempting fate, like if they spoke too loudly, the dream might pop. Instead, they talked about practicalities. Would they need a new coat for the colder winters up there? What would happen to their furniture? His father had a lead on a job with a building maintenance company near the conservatory, thanks to a reference from the hall manager. It paid better. It was days, not nights. One afternoon, Leo sat at the old piano. He wasn't practicing the Chopin or any of the classical pieces. He was just playing his mother's piece, Les Close du Souvenir, softly, letting his fingers remember the journey from grief to lullaby. He played it slower now, more thoughtfully. He wasn't playing for an audience anymore, or to prove a point. He was playing for himself, to feel close to her. His father came and stood in the doorway, listening. When the last note faded, he spoke. "You know, she never played it that way." Leo turned on the bench. "What way?" "The ending," his father said, leaning against the doorframe. He had a faraway look. "She always left it, hanging, sad, beautiful, but sad, like a question with no answer." He pointed a thick finger at the piano. "You finished it. You gave it an answer." Leo looked at his hands. He hadn't really thought of it like that. He just played what she taught him. But maybe, in teaching it to him, in living with him, her music had changed. It had grown a new ending. Maybe the answer was here all along, Leo said quietly. His father nodded, his eyes shining. Maybe it was. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The day came for their meeting with Anton Voss in the city. It wasn't at the grand concert hall this time, but at the conservatory itself, a huge ancient building of stone and ivy that looked like a castle for music. Leo felt his throat go dry just walking up the steps. Students hurried past, carrying instrument cases, talking and laughing in a language of cadenzas and master classes. He felt like an imposter in his clean, simple clothes. Voss's office was at the end of a long hallway that echoed with the sound of a dozen different instruments practicing behind closed doors. A chaotic, beautiful symphony of effort. The office was surprisingly small and messy, overflowing with books and sheet music. The grand piano in the corner was the only sleek thing in the room. Voss greeted them not as a grand judge, but as a busy teacher. He shook Leo's father's hand firmly, then looked at Leo. "You look tired. Good. It means you're thinking. He had them sit. He didn't offer praise or talk about the night in the lobby. Instead, he got straight to business. He laid out a brutal, exciting plan. Leo would need to catch up on music theory, on history, on skills other students had been drilling for years. The scholarship covered group classes for all of that. But the private lessons with Voss, he explained, would be about something else. They will be about unlearning, Voss said, his eyes sharp. You have habits. Some are good, the feeling, the connection. Some are bad tension in your shoulders, a heavy foot on the pedal. We will build the technique to support the emotion, not the other way around. It will be frustrating. You will hate me sometimes. Your mother did. There was no sugar-coating. It was hard work, presented plainly. And strangely, that made Leo trust him more. This wasn't a fairy godmother offering a magic wish. This was a master craftsman offering an apprenticeship dot as Voss talked about scales and etudes. Leo's gaze drifted to the window. On the ledge was a single framed photograph. It was black and white, a little faded. A young woman with a fierce, intelligent face and a shy smile sat at a piano, looking not at the camera, but at the keys. It was his mother. Younger than he'd ever known her, but unmistakably her dot Voss saw where he was looking. He went quiet for a moment. He walked over, picked up the photograph, and brought it back. He handed it to Leo's father. I took that, he said, his voice softer. After her first successful recital. She was annoyed with me for using a flash. Leo's father took the picture, his hands trembling slightly. He stared at it, drinking in the image of his wife as a